Here is the highly requested, satisfying Doomsday hoarding story. There is no fighting or killing plotline. Only the ultimate satisfaction of clearing supermarket shelves. This story is complete. Perfect for bedtime relaxation. Wishing you a good night and sweet dreams. Extreme weather arrived. Extreme cold carrying blizzards swallowed the entire earth. Looking around. Silvery white blizzards and temperatures below -100 degrees covered the entire city. In just the time it takes to drink a cup of tea, people were frozen into ice sculptures. My name is Baifang. This morning, while I was shopping at the supermarket, I suddenly heard a sales clerk complaining to a colleague. Someone is actually buying down jackets in the middle of summer. Isn't that person weird? Driven by curiosity, I followed the young woman who bought the down jackets. I discovered that she had actually built a shelter in the suburbs and was constantly spreading the news online that the extreme cold apocalypse was coming. This realization made me feel a bit uneasy and panicked. When I was a kid during winter, my childhood friend pushed me into a pond as a prank, which left me with rheumatism. The pain in my arm is more accurate than the weather forecast. Every time there's a sharp drop in temperature, my arm hurts for days. Recently, in this 40-degree weather Celsius, my arm started hurting again. Logically, temperatures are high in summer. Even if it rains in a few days, the temperature shouldn't drop this drastically. This abnormal situation made me feel something was very wrong. I checked the recent weather forecast. For the next week, the temperature is supposed to get hotter day by day. There wasn't even a sign of rain. Could it be? Thinking about how my body is more accurate than the forecast, I still decided to go to the supermarket to buy some food, planning not to go out for the next few days. I went to a large nearby supermarket, bought some meat, and grabbed a few bags of dumplings to boil and eat later. Just as I was looking for a cashier to check out, I suddenly heard a sales clerk complaining to her colleague, "You wouldn't believe it. Someone just wanted to buy down jackets. It's the middle of summer. Why on earth is she buying down jackets? Isn't she afraid of getting a heat stroke?" Another clerk asked in confusion. I know, right? She bought over a dozen down jackets without even looking at the styles. Do you think there's something wrong with her head? Who buys down jackets in the dead of summer? And they are all leftovers from last year. While the two clerks were talking, I casually asked, "Are you serious? Who is it buying down jackets in the summer?" Seeing that I didn't believe it, the clerk pointed directly to a young woman pushing a shopping cart not far away. "It's that girl. Go look if you don't believe me. Her cart is full of winter clothes." The clerk's words completely piqued my curiosity. After checking out, I quietly followed behind the young woman. This girl didn't just buy down jackets. She also bought a ton of heat packs and space heaters. All her supplies were bought in massive bulk. Now I was even more curious about her. Immediately after, a thought crossed my mind. Did she escape from a mental asylum? I've always been very curious since I was a kid. And I have a strong gossip-loving nature. Normally, I would absolutely have to figure out what this girl was up to. But my arm had been hurting so much these past 2 days that I was in no mood to think about anything else. I walked out of the supermarket and drove to a nearby pharmacy. Upon entering the pharmacy, I saw a familiar figure. The young woman who was just shopping wildly at the supermarket was now buying medicine by the boxes in the pharmacy. This made me even more curious. If she was gifting it to someone, who gives medicine as a gift? And if she was taking it herself, it would take forever to finish all these pills. Isn't she afraid of an overdose? Smelling a massive scoop, I decided I absolutely had to find out what she was doing, driven by my curiosity. I drove my car and tailed her. She was driving, and I followed behind her. I thought she was heading home. But to my surprise, after leaving the pharmacy, she went straight to the fresh food market. Arriving at the market, she bought a huge pile of cured meats and sausages, poultry, fish, and tons of vegetables. But that wasn't all. She then headed straight to the grain and oil market, buying dozens of bags of rice and dozens of bags of flour. I thought about it carefully. Most of the food she bought at the fresh market would be very hard to store for long. While I was thinking, her small truck was already stuffed full of the things she bought. Surely, she had to go home now. I kept driving, tailing her closely. I followed her truck out of the city limits and finally saw her turn onto a remote dirt road. Driven by my curiosity, I parked my car by the side of the road and quietly walked down the dirt path. When I saw the scene inside, I instantly froze in place. The house was surrounded by barbed wire fencing, and the roof was fully covered with solar panels. I approached the gate and peeked inside through a crack. I saw that young woman unloading things from her small truck into the house. Looking from afar, her haul was piled high with boxes upon boxes of dumplings, hot pot base, compression biscuits, and the like. It was a true shelter. What was she planning? The scene before me completely sparked my thirst for knowledge. I used her license plate and phone number to find her social media accounts on Weibo and Douyin. In the past few days, she had been commenting on various extreme weather videos, spreading the message that a deep freeze apocalypse was coming. Connecting this with her crazy hoarding behavior and the sudden severe pain in my arm these past few days, a terrifying thought suddenly popped into my mind. Maybe what she said was true. The extreme cold apocalypse was really coming. Thinking of this, I immediately packed up my thick winter clothes and returned to my rural hometown. The city was too densely populated, making it easy to become a target, and it wasn't suitable for hoarding. My family's old house is located halfway up a mountain. It's about 700 meters away from the nearest neighbor in the village. so hoarding supplies wouldn't be easily noticed. Moreover, I have a reinforced shelter there. And a heated brick bed kang. It's much better for laying low than the city. A few years ago, to ride the wave of a streaming trend, I renovated my rural yard into a doomsday shelter to broadcast live. I streamed for half a year and almost starved to death doing it. But I never expected it to come in handy now. I had a crazy idea back then. Dead set on making a living out of streaming and becoming an influencer. The entire shelter was completely built according to descriptions in Doomsday novels. It was specially modified, using only top-quality, real materials. The walls were reinforced with soundproofing cotton, bulletproof glass, blast-resistant doors, one-way window films, and thermal insulation walls. Even the solar panels used were top of the line. I checked the solar panels and found they could still generate electricity normally. The security cameras were also fully functional, aside from being a bit dusty due to prolonged vacancy. There was no damage anywhere. With just a little cleaning, it was perfectly livable. In the storage room, I also found weapons I had purchased earlier, along with several boxes of compressed biscuits and military mess. These items have a long shelf life and hadn't gone bad even now. The only issue was the quantity. It wasn't enough to sustain me for a long time. If I wanted to safely survive the extreme cold apocalypse, I needed to hoard far more supplies. According to the young woman's online posts, I only had 2 days left to stock up. In 2 days, the deep freeze would arrive right on schedule. Time was running out. I immediately rented a large truck. I drove it to local wholesale suppliers and ordered massive quantities of water and food. While they were loading the goods onto my truck, I rented another car and headed to the supermarket. Just the day before, I was mocking that girl for being crazy to buy down jackets in summer. Today, I was doing the exact same thing. Perhaps because of the recent incident, the sales clerk already had experience with customers buying winter gear in summer. Upon hearing that I also wanted to buy down jackets, she took me straight to the warehouse. She grabbed 10 down jackets for me and handed them over, looking at me like I was an idiot. At the same time, she muttered under her breath, "What is going on lately? Why are so many people buying down jackets in the heat of summer? Maybe I should buy a couple to take home just in case." After paying her swiftly, I then started sweeping the supermarket for daily necessities. Heat packs, space heaters, and disposable everyday items. After transporting these purchases home, I went back to the supplier and drove the loaded truck back. But one truckload of supplies was still far from enough. After unloading everything into the shelter, I drove the truck back to the supplier again, having them loaded up with more water and food. Time was tight. I had bought a diesel generator previously. The house had a heated brick bed kang, but no firewood to heat it with. So I went and bought a massive amount of firewood and coal. I just needed to hoard as much as humanly possible to give myself extra layers of security. When the extreme cold arrived, the next day, the extreme cold apocalypse was supposed to arrive after 12 o'clock p.m. today. I threw the down jackets I bought earlier into the car and drove out. The local town also had butcher shops and pharmacies, but I was afraid buying too much locally would attract unwanted attention and make people target me. So I specifically drove to a much farther county town. It was a 40-minute drive from my house to the county town. I headed out right at dawn. Before 10 o'clock a.m., I had finished all my purchases and was ready to head back. But unexpectedly, the car broke down halfway. I hurriedly took out my phone and called a nearby repair shop, asking them to come and fix it as fast as possible. The mechanic arrived quickly and swiftly solved the malfunction. But because of this delay, it was already approaching 12 o'clock p.m. I immediately sped off in the direction of my home as fast as I could. I hadn't been driving for long when the clear sky suddenly turned dark. Immediately after, bean-sized raindrops started smashing against my windshield. The heavy rain lasted for less than 10 minutes before it turned into snowflakes. The puddles on the ground were slowly freezing over. Even the plants that had just been rained on were now encased in ice. Countless vehicles crashed into each other the moment the rain turned to ice. Fortunately, I had anticipated this scene and took the back roads in advance. Even so, I had to concentrate fully. Feeling the biting chill creeping into my body, I hurriedly put on the down jacket and blasted the car's heater. Only then did I feel a bit warmer. And so, what was normally a 40-minute drive took me a full 2 hours to finally get home. After pulling the car into the yard, I looked at the thermometer hanging outside the window. I then realized that even though only an hour or two had passed, the temperature outside had plummeted from 30 degrees to minus 30 degrees Celsius. The reading on the thermometer was still dropping at a visible rate. Seeing the scene before me, I knew in my heart, it seemed that this deep freeze was even more terrifying than I had imagined. Driving all the way back, my feet were almost completely numb. I hadn't left the heating on when I left the house, so stepping inside felt like entering an ice cave. I immediately turned on the space heater and lit the stove. As the flames rose higher, the temperature in the room gradually warmed up. Opening my phone, the internet was flooded with netizens complaining about the extreme cold. Many people ended up in the hospital because of the sheer cliff drop in temperature. The sudden deep freeze caught everyone entirely off guard. Just this morning, it was over 30 degrees outside. People were sweating on their way to work even in short sleeves. But in just the time it took to eat lunch, the temperature crashed to minus 40 degrees. Relevant departments immediately issued notices to suspend work and classes. But getting home from the office became a massive challenge. On such a hot day, people practically wished they could carry ACs on their backs. Who would bring heavy winter clothes to work? Furthermore, it was snowing heavily outside. Coworkers who drove could at least slowly navigate home. Those who commuted on electric scooters were forced to wait helplessly in their offices. But no one expected that the heavy snowfall wouldn't stop at all. Instead, it kept getting heavier. In less than 2 hours, it was already calf deep. Now, people were completely panicking. The sudden extreme cold and snowfall made taxi drivers see a business opportunity, and they started demanding outrageous fares. But seeing so many vehicles getting stuck or crashing in the snow, soon enough, they started worrying for their own safety and refused to take passengers anymore. In -40-degree temperatures, an office worker in short sleeves trying to trek through the snow was basically asking for death. Many smart people, after braving the freezing cold to get home, immediately rushed to nearby supermarkets to crazily fight over supplies. Things were much better on my end. Because I was halfway up the mountain, I had a clear view of the village below, and I didn't spot anything unusual. Besides, virtually every household in the countryside stores grain. As long as they could survive the extreme cold, they wouldn't face major problems. The medicine and meat I just brought back were still in the car. I had to take advantage of the fact that the cold had just begun to unload them. Otherwise, it would only get harder as time went on. During the time I spent unloading, the temperature had plummeted to -50 degrees. I layered onto thermal sweaters and put on thick padded winter pants on my lower half. But even so, I didn't dare relax in the slightest. At -50 degrees, despite wearing thick layers, I was still freezing to death. The piercing wind whipped snow onto my face, feeling like countless razor blades slicing my skin. I could barely keep my eyes open. Now I had to quickly move the supplies from the car into the house. Otherwise, when the temperature dropped even further, trying to come out to carry things would be almost impossible. I moved the medicine into the house first. These items were packed in boxes and bottles, so they were relatively lightweight and easy to carry. Next was the meat. Although I didn't have a giant freezer, the meat was already frozen rock solid outside. It wouldn't spoil at all. I gritted my teeth, grabbed a huge bag of pork, and hauled it inside. After placing the meat in a storage room, I went back out to fetch the rest. I am allergic to vegetables, so naturally, I bought a lot of meat. I went back and forth carrying things for an hour before finally moving everything indoors. The weather was so cold that I didn't have to worry about food preservation at all. Just by opening a window, the room became a natural freezer. As for the medicine and food that couldn't withstand freezing, I placed them near the stove to prevent them from being ruined by the extreme low temperatures. Once all the supplies were safely inside, I immediately made myself a cup of hot coffee, terrified of catching a cold. The fire in the stove burned intensely, crackling and popping warmly. After finishing my coffee, I cooked myself a bowl of noodles. After eating, I lay down on the heated brick bed. The fire in the stove was blazing, sending heat through the flues of the bed. Laying on it felt like being wrapped in an oven, without feeling a trace of chill. Covered in blankets, I snuggled up and started reading a novel. In such a cozy environment, I drifted off to sleep without even realizing it. When I woke up again, it was already noon the next day. Over the course of the night, the snow outside had reached knee depth. The temperature had dropped even further to -70 degrees. The reading on the thermometer was still steadily falling. At this rate, the temperature would probably hit -80 degrees tomorrow. Opening my phone, various trending topics about the extreme popped up all over the internet. It's too cold here. Even as someone from the Northeast, I can't handle this temperature. I've piled 8 or 9 blankets on my bed at home, and my hands and feet are still freezing. Sleeping at night feels like sleeping in an ice cellar. The water pipes in my house burst from the freeze. We can't even cook here. We can't even melt the ice. I read the news for a while, turned off my phone, and decided to get up to cook something to fill my stomach. Getting out of bed right now was no easy task. It required immense willpower. For lunch, I made a steaming hot pot. Looking at the meat slices and meatballs boiling in the pot, my mouth was already watering non-stop. Once the ingredients were cooked, I eagerly picked up a piece of beef and popped it into my mouth. Then I started wolfing down the food greedily. Just as I was enjoying my meal, a sudden cracking sound came from outside. Hearing the sound, I hurriedly looked out the window. I realized a large tree had been snapped by the snow and wind. Luckily, my house was located quite a distance from those trees. Seeing that there was no real danger, I went back inside and continued eating my hot pot. The deep freeze was far more terrifying than imagined. By the third day of the apocalypse, the snow outside was already waist-deep. The temperature had plummeted to -80 degrees. There was no more news on the internet whatsoever. Overnight, both electricity and internet signals in the city were completely cut off. But I knew, without power, the surviving humans out there would only suffer even more. I woke up at 8 o'clock a.m., planning to get up and eat something. But it was just too warm and cozy under the blankets. I stayed in bed until noon, before finally dragging myself up. I was too lazy to really cook, so I just placed a plate of barbecue meat on the stove to heat up. Then I lay back down on the heated bed. I kept the stove burning blazingly hot, the firewood crackling and popping inside. Shortly after placing the meat on the stove, the room was filled with a delicious aroma. Looking at the tender, sizzling meat, I eagerly took it off the stove and popped a piece of the roasted meat into my mouth. Just as I was savoring the food, the snow outside, like goose feathers, was falling densely. Many people who failed to make it home froze to death alive out there. In -80-degree weather, nobody wearing short sleeves could possibly survive. On the city streets, you could occasionally see frozen bodies, having long lost their lives. On the fourth day of the extreme cold, The temperature dropped to -90 degrees. It was still snowing outside, but the rate of the temperature drop had slowed down significantly. I continued to lie on the heated bed all day, only getting up to move around when I was really hungry. Life was comfortable and peaceful. But this peace was soon broken by intruders. That morning, I had just woken up and was checking the security cameras when I heard voices outside. When the camera captured the people's faces, I realized that the visitors were actually second uncle's family. Why would they come here? Seeing second uncle's family appear here, I immediately grew suspicious. Our family and second uncle's family were on very bad terms. Second uncle had always coveted another piece of land that belonged to our family, and tried every trick in the book to get it. My parents naturally refused to give it to him. The two families often fought over this piece of land, and our relationship grew increasingly bitter. After my parents died in an accident, second uncle and aunt kept making a scene demanding the land, so I just gave it to them. Ever since then, they had never contacted me once. I certainly didn't believe they braved the severe cold and snow to come here just to pay a friendly visit. While I was wondering about their motives, the security camera picked up their conversation. Just our luck. Why is it snowing so heavily? It even collapsed the roof of our house. If it wasn't for that, why would we ever need to come here in such freezing weather? Second aunt, wrapped tightly in her thick cotton jacket, said this while shivering violently. Exactly. Who would have thought it'd snow in the middle of summer? But thankfully, that wretched girl's house is just ahead. At least we won't be left without a place to stay. Second uncle chimed in. He paused for a moment, rubbed his hands together, and spoke again. I heard a while ago that wretched girl built a shelter here to do some kind of live streaming, and squandered all the money my older brother left behind. What a sin. That money was supposed to belong to our son. Speaking of this, second uncle looked behind him. Trailing behind him was a 200-pound spoiled man-child eating as he walked. It was my male cousin, Bufin. And behind Bufin, there was a young girl. She was wearing thin clothing, walking in the snow, shivering uncontrollably. She was dragging over 100 pounds of luggage behind her, moving forward with great difficulty. This was my female cousin, Kinking. Seeing cousin Kinking walking too slowly, second aunt immediately marched over and slapped her right across the face. Why are you walking so slowly? These are all the blankets your brother Bufin likes. If you get them wet, how is he going to sleep tonight? Faced with her mother's scolding, cousin felt deeply wronged. None of you are carrying anything. I'm the only one dragging this heavy luggage. How am I supposed to keep up with you? But before she could finish her sentence, second aunt violently grabbed her ear. You dare to talk back? Do you know how hard it was for me to raise you? I make you do a little bit of work, and you dare talk back to me? After saying that, she slapped her 2 more times. The male cousin walking ahead saw this. Not only did he not try to stop it, but he also flashed a smug, malicious smile. I had never expected anyone to come here. The burnt wood and coal ash had been dumped directly in my yard. When second uncle's family arrived outside the shelter, through the gap in the gate, they saw the car parked in the yard and the freshly dumped coal ash. Knowing I was inside, he was overjoyed. Through the iron gate, he shouted toward the house. Niece, hurry up and open the gate for your uncle. Our family is about to freeze to death. Let us in to warm up quickly. Second aunt also shouted. Baifang, it's your second aunt. Quickly open the gate and let us in. Your brother Bufan is freezing out here. Second uncle and aunt kept pounding on the iron gate, shouting loudly. I pretended not to hear them and completely ignored them. With second uncle's family's terrible personalities, if I actually let them in, my fate would be even worse than my female cousins. They would force me to do all the dirty and tiring work. And I bet all my supplies would be stolen by them too. They might even kick me out of my own house. Naturally, I wasn't going to respond to them. Second uncle and aunt kept yelling outside for a long time, screaming until their voices were hoarse, but I didn't make a single sound from inside the house. The biting cold wind made my male cousin shiver uncontrollably. Mom, can you make that woman open the door already? I'm freezing to death. Look, my hands are all red. Seeing her precious son's hands turn red from the cold, second aunt immediately panicked. She completely ignored the fact that her daughter's hands were already red, swollen, and bleeding from the freezing cold. She snatched the gloves right off her daughter and handed them to her son. Then, she said viciously, your brother's hands are freezing red. And as his older sister, you don't even know enough to give him your gloves? Are you asking for a beating? Cousin King wanted to explain, but upon seeing second aunt's glare, she swallowed hard and said nothing. After lecturing her daughter, second aunt ran back to the gate and slapped the iron gate, yelling, you wretched girl, I know you're in there. We are your own blood. Your uncle and aunt. When you were little, I even gave you an egg. Yes, in my entire life, she gave me exactly 1 egg. And that egg was rotten. After I ate it, I got food poisoning and ended up in the hospital. I didn't expect her to remember it so clearly. Over the years, her family took advantage of my family so many times, but she conveniently forgot all of that. Seeing no movement from the house, second uncle also tried to play the family card. Baifang, I am your own flesh and blood, your uncle. Your parents are gone. We are your closest relatives now. How can you watch your own family freeze outside? I had installed soundproofing cotton in the house, but they were screaming so loudly that it was starting to annoy me. It just so happened that I was getting hungry. I put on some clothes and started grilling pork belly and sausages on the stove. I also prepared some hairy crabs and lobsters. The fire was strong, and the meat skewers quickly started sizzling with oil. The cooked crabs and lobsters, paired with the barbecue skewers, smelled incredibly delicious. But second uncle's family outside wasn't so lucky. Second uncle and aunt shouted through the iron gate until their throats were hoarse. Yet they received no response from me. Seeing that I wouldn't open the gate, they huddled by the wall to discuss a plan. They didn't know that I had installed pinhole cameras all around the yard. I could clearly see and hear their every move. That wretched girl. She's exactly like her father. If it wasn't for the fact that my older brother and his wife refused to give me that land, why would I have tampered with their car? They only had one daughter. Why would they need homestead land? Once we get in, this land and everything in the house will belong to our Bufin. Their conversation left me utterly stunned. I had always thought my parents' death was an accident. It turned out second uncle and aunt were behind it all. Thinking about this, I couldn't help but clench my fists tightly. This grudge. I swear I will avenge them. Originally, I just planned to hide inside and not open the door, leaving them to fend for themselves. But now, I just wanted them dead. Second uncle and aunt were still huddled by the wall plotting how to get in. They didn't have tools to force the iron gate open, nor a ladder to climb over the wall. They decided to go back to their house to get a ladder. But the snow outside was now waist deep. Every step was extremely difficult. Neither of them wanted to go. Naturally, their eyes fell upon cousin Kinking. Mom, this snow is too deep. And that ladder is so heavy. How can I carry it over by myself? Before she could finish, second aunt's slap landed on her face again. How heavy could it be? Didn't you just carry all the luggage over here? So what if you go back to carry a ladder now? You're just being lazy. Hurry back and fetch the ladder. Otherwise, where is your brother going to sleep tonight? Second uncle was also furious as he urged her on. Cousin Kinking, terrified that another word would bring another beating, trudged through the thigh-deep snow back to their house. Having learned of their plan, I directly boiled several kettles of water on the stove, preparing to give them a chilling surprise. Over an hour passed, and cousin Kinking finally carried the ladder back over. Her lips were already purple from the cold, and her body trembled uncontrollably. Second uncle snatched the ladder from her, still complaining that she was too slow, making everyone freeze out here for so long. Why aren't you going in yet? Climb over and open the gate from the inside for us. Second uncle ordered aggressively, under her father's coercion. She didn't dare to resist. She could only climb up the ladder. After jumping into the yard, she opened the gate from the inside. Soon, second uncle's family reached the inner door of the house. The door and windows had long been replaced with blast-resistant doors and bulletproof glass. The freezing weather gradually stripped away their sanity. Second uncle and aunt stood before the door, kicking it with all their might. But no matter how hard they kicked, the door didn't budge an inch. They then tried using the ladder to ram the glass, but the glass didn't take a single scratch either. Seeing this, the two of them stood by the door and started cursing me out. But I wasn't going to indulge them anymore. I put on my down jacket, wrapped a scarf around my neck, and pushed open the third-floor window. The temperature outside was now approaching -90 degrees. I decided to take the kettles of boiling water and through a flexible hose, pour it directly down on them. This boiling water flowing through the hose wouldn't freeze immediately. Down below, second uncle, second aunt, and Bufin were still continuously cursing me. Little did they know, their countdown to death had already begun. I poured the water right over them. The hot water from the hose hit them, and in this extreme cold, in just a matter of seconds, they started freezing over. Then, they slowly lost all signs of life. Cousin Bufin reacted quickly and dodged out of the way. Cousin Kinking stood afar, quietly watching everything unfold. Seeing his parents frozen into ice sculptures, Bufin didn't feel an ounce of sadness. He walked right up to his sister Kinking. "You bitch, take off your clothes and give them to me. Hurry up, I'm freezing to death. If I give you my clothes, what am I supposed to wear?" This time, Kinking didn't back down. She stared straight at her brother and retorted, "What you wear is none of my business. Don't you forget. Everything in our family is supposed to be mine." After Bufin finished speaking, he quickly reached behind him and grabbed a sharp icicle. But Kinking was faster. She stabbed him like a dagger. "You bitch! How dare you?" Bufin looked at his sister in disbelief. But the intense pain from his body told him that this was not a dream. "Who are you calling a bitch? I am your older sister." Without finishing her sentence, she thrust the icicle even deeper into him. Seeing her brother gradually lose his life, she said, "My dear brother, Mom and Dad loved you the most. They surely wouldn't want you to suffer alone up here. So I'm sending you down to keep them company." After saying that, she completely finished him off. I watched everything unfold with an expressionless face. I wasn't surprised. Second uncle's family severely favored sons over daughters. Something like this happening was entirely predictable. Ever since I learned that second uncle caused my parents' death, I thoroughly hated his family. But toward this pitiful female cousin, I just couldn't bring myself to hate her. I went to my closet, took out a few down jackets, and packed up some heat packs and food. I threw them down to her from the window. In the apocalypse, human nature is unpredictable. I didn't dare let her inside either. But there were plenty of abandoned houses in the village. If she wanted to find a place to stay, it wouldn't be difficult. As for whether she could survive, that would depend entirely on herself. Cousin Kinking seemed to understand what I meant. She picked up the supplies I threw to her and left the shelter without looking back. Watching her retreating figure, I braved the severe cold to drag the bodies of second uncle's family outside the gates. After locking the gate securely, I went back and lay down on my heated bed. The extreme cold lasted for 200 days. During those 200 days, I spent 80% of my time lying on my heated bed. For no other reason than it was just too warm and comfortable under the covers. After 200 days, the temperature began to rise. The government established an official shelter in the city center. On my way to the shelter, I saw two familiar faces. One of them was the young woman who was buying down jackets back then. The other was the sales clerk from the supermarket. When the sales clerk saw me, she immediately walked over and greeted us enthusiastically. "Thanks to you two buying down jackets, my family was able to survive." Her words left me stunned for a moment. Before I could even ask her what she meant, the clerk's voice rang in my ears again. "Seeing the two of you buying down jackets in the dead of summer, I followed suit and bought a few pieces myself. Those down jackets ended up saving our family's lives." Hearing the clerk's words, I couldn't help but smile. At the same time, I thought to myself, the clerk thanked me and the young woman. So, who should I be thanking? Is it the young woman? Or should I thank my own curiosity?